discovering resources, and installing agents. So in the last nugget, we prepared our environment for the incoming data that's going to happen when we actually install the agents and discover the resources in our network environment out there. And now that we have it ready to go, the next step really is to identify which of the computers in our environment we actually want to, number one, discover, and then number two, actually perhaps even install some agents too. Now, in this nugget, we're going to talk about different types of monitoring. As you'll find out, there are three different types of monitoring that depend on what type of client that is on the other side, and then also what you want to do with those clients. If there's a certain level of richness that you want to have with your management capability of those clients, we're going to use the discovery wizard to actually discover the clients on the network and then go ahead and install those agents from the console itself. And then also we're going to talk about the process of doing the manual agent installation. Now, in the last nugget, we spoke about how Microsoft is very specific about these manual agent installations, and by default, manual agent installations will not be allowed into the Operations Manager infrastructure. In fact, they'll be rejected by default. And if you remember in that previous nugget, we also set the setting away from the default so that we'll actually be able to have it in a pending state as opposed to automatically rejecting it. But what we'll talk about here is the process by which you'll go through that manual agent installation if you want to do that. And also, if you're interested, the process for deploying agents from the command line. Now, the deployment of agents can be somewhat problematic if you have a lot of agents in your environment. And so if you have, for example, Configuration Manager, the other System Center tool, or some other tool that will allow you to deploy software to servers in your environment, you may want to know how to run that agent installation silently from the command line. And then lastly, we're going to talk about using Active Directory to automatically assign computers to whatever management groups are in your environment. We started that process during the installation nugget where we talked about the extension of the schema, but there's a couple other things that need to happen, and we're going to do that now so you can see how that automatic assignment is done from the perspective of the console. Now, before we actually get into clicking around inside the interface, what I do want to bring up here is another screen here that talks about the different types of monitoring capabilities that we have with Operations Manager. Two of these types of monitoring relate to if the target system is a Windows-based system, and the third obviously relates if it doesn't. Now, there are two ways in which we can work with clients that are Windows-based, one of which is agent managed, meaning that we have to go and install an agent onto those computers for them to be able to do the things that we want them to do. Now, having an agent on those computers is kind of nice because that agent runs within the local system context, or has the ability to run within the local system context. It's locally installed to that computer, and so it can run actions on behalf of the console in a much easier way than if you had had to do it with the agentless method. And so you have this little agent that sits on the target computer, and it takes care of collecting all the event log stuff and the WMI stuff and the performance management stuff, and then sends that stuff onto the server. But there are some situations where you may not want to actually install agents to computers in your environment. And in those cases, you may want to use the agentless mechanism. Now, the agentless mechanism obviously does not have an agent. That's why it's the agentless mechanism. But because there's no agent installed to those computers, the level of stuff that you can do with the computers that are under your management is significantly less. If you think about it, if I'm trying to use remote calls, maybe remotely touching WMI, remotely pulling down those event log things, it's a little bit more difficult for me to go and make changes on those systems because there's no agent there to enact the change. And so conversely, though, you may find that for maybe it's security policy or your network policy, or maybe you're on the other side of the network for some reason. For one reason or another, it may not make sense for you to put an agent on there, and Operations Manager includes the ability for you to manage those clients without an agent. Now, that being said, the number of agentless managed machines in one Operations Manager instance is relatively limited because there's more work involved by the server to manage those agentless clients. And so be very careful with the assignment of agentless clients because you can overload that server very quickly. The third thing you can do is actually talk to networking devices, and that's using SNMP. So if you have network devices on your network that have SNMP, public and private strings, community strings actually already set, you can actually get some limited information from those network devices as well. Now, this is really useful for your standard up-down sort of metrics from those network devices. Right out of the box, Operations Manager isn't going to have a lot of deep capability of really deeply digging inside of your network devices to find performance information, net flow information, all of that real deep networking stuff. But again, right out of the box, you actually can connect to network devices and have them notify you whenever problems may occur. So let's actually start by running the Discovery Wizard and finding out more or less what sort of computers we have out in our environment. We can do that by clicking here on the Administration node and bringing us up to the Administration Management Console. And anywhere really pretty much in here, we can right-click and actually choose to run the Discovery Wizard. Now, the Discovery Wizard, what it's going to do is give us a number of different options for identifying sort of what we want to look for, first of all. And then once we identify what we want to look for, then we can choose which of the objects that we want to manage. First of all, by default, we can choose the automatic computer discovery, which effectively scans the entire domain for all the Windows-based computers in our domain. Now, obviously, if I'm running this against the entire domain, I may capture my workstations, for example, my desktops and laptops, and you probably don't have the licenses to bring those under management, or you're probably uninterested in keeping those under management and learning about what's going on in those systems, at least for the most part. What we may want to do, however, is this advanced discovery, which is why it's brought up here by default. What I want to do, for example, here is to change the computer and device types from servers and clients to just servers only. In doing that, all I'm going to do is look for those computers in my environment that are Windows Server and then really ignore the Windows clients that are out there. I want to refer those to the management server, scom.nugget.nuggetlab.com, and click the next button here. And now I actually get a chance or an opportunity to streamline down that search to limit it to maybe certain elements of the environment. Maybe I want to create a custom filter that filters out just one OU or by one computer name or by one computer type or various things in there. Or perhaps I just want to manually type in the names of the computers that I'm interested in looking for. Now let me start up here under Scan Active Directory to show you what you can do by clicking the Configure button here. You'll see in the resulting screen I have a pretty common option, a dialog box that appears here. I can choose the role, workstations and servers, or domain controller. I can choose the computer name, or even create an advanced query here based on computer name or description or who it's managed by or the OS version, for example. That allows me to create some custom queries based off of what I'm looking for. Maybe I'm looking for where the computer name, for example, starts with a certain value, or perhaps I'm looking where the operating system starts with, again, a certain value here. That allows me to very specifically define which computers I'm looking for. What I want to do here actually is, instead of doing that, let's actually scan the entire Active Directory, any role, any computer name. You'll see here that it includes a SAM account name and then that location there for what it's looking for, and choose the next button. In order for it to scan the network, it's going to have an administrator account, and in this case it's going to be the action account as we identified in the installation procedures in that last nugget a couple nuggets ago. I'm going to use that management server action account to accomplish this, or I could alternatively use another user account if I want, and type the user information in there. When I run the Discovery Wizard, that Discovery Wizard's now going to go scan the domain and look for devices on the network that could potentially be discovered. Now this process can take a long period of time, so I'm actually going to pause the recording until we complete it. And we're back. You'll see here that in my environment I have one server that is available to be managed, and that's dcnugget.nuggetlab.com. Obviously that's the domain controller that's running this particular lab. It's a small environment, but it's a test environment or an evaluation environment for the purposes of videoing this series. So if I choose to select dcnugget, you'll see that I have a couple of other options down here. I can choose what management server, and then also it's sort of hidden here, but what management mode that I want. I have the option of choosing agent or the agentless mode. Now in this case I want to install that agent to dcnugget so that it can actually do all the fun things that we want to do as the actions, the tasks, and those sorts of things. So I want to choose agent here. If I choose the next button, I have a location that by default that I can choose to install that agent to. In this case, it's Program Files / System Center Operations Manager 2007. Now that agent can actually complete actions based off of local system credentials or other credentials. Perhaps I can give it domain credentials to actually perform actions on that server. Now I'm actually going to choose local system here because most of the actions that need to be accomplished by the agent are directly for that system itself. So local system has the rights it needs to be able to do what it needs to do on that system. Later on I can actually go back and change that if necessary, if perhaps I need to run an action that requires traversal over the network or those sorts of things. If I click the Finish button here, as you'll see, it's going to begin the process of actually starting that agent installation. We're going through completing the task, and this is actually a task status window that you're going to see quite regularly regularly whenever you're accomplishing tasks on your operations manager server. And in this case, the task that we're actually attempting to accomplish here is the installation of that agent. Now, you don't actually have to wait here for the agents to be installed, but it's probably a good idea at this point to actually sit and make sure that those agents install correctly. You'll see here that down here at the bottom, you can close this dialog at any time, and it's not going to interrupt those executing tasks. Those tasks occur in the background. But at this point, we're going to wait and make sure that that agent installs correctly. And it appears to have installed correctly. You'll see here that we now show success and the task is completed successfully. So if I go back now, you'll now see that I have one device that is ready to go and ready to go for management. So let me go ahead here and actually refresh the screen. You'll see here that that pending management task that was there while we were completing the agent installation has moved up, and we now have one agent managed server in our environment. If I click down here, you'll see that that agent managed server is dcnugget.nuggetlab.com. Now, we're not monitoring that server yet because we just installed the agent at this point, but we do actually have that agent installed, and we're ready to begin the process of actually doing something with dcnugget.nuggetlab.com. Now, if I had other computers that I wanted to install, or maybe not install the agent to, and use the agentless solution, I can go back and just rerun the discovery wizard as I want to. And instead of actually running the wizard the last step of installing the agent, I can choose agentless, and it'll actually manage those clients via the agentless method as well. One other thing that I want to show you too, because the screens are just a little bit different, has to do with the network device discovery. And you'll see down here, this is network devices. If I choose network devices and click the next button here, I'm actually asked to specify some network addresses for network devices that are on my network. So for example, if I'm in the 192.168.0.1 through 192.168.0.254 net, for example, let's say I have a Class C set up in my environment, I can then scan every IP address, every endpoint between those two numbers to look for network devices that have SNMP set up. And now very specifically, it has SNMP set up with the community string, the public community string, set to a particular value. Now, my job here is not to teach you what SNMP is. And SNMP effectively allows you to manage network devices and even read information, mainly read information off of network devices, especially in this case. But most of the SNMP devices in your environment are going to have a default read community string of public, all in lowercase. And so this is a good way for you to actually look around your network to see if there are any devices around that actually have SNMP enabled. You can also choose what version of SNMP you want to use. For the most part, you're going to be using SNMP version 2. And then also provide a discovery timeout here. Now, my environment doesn't have any SNMP enabled devices, but by running this discovery, if I had, for example, a router, or if I had another network device of some form that actually had SNMP enabled, I would be able to use this discovery method to actually pull information off of that device and recognize when that device perhaps has gone down or a configuration change has occurred on those devices. I hit the discover button here and it begins that same process that we saw before. That will actually bring those devices here under my network devices list and allow me to monitor those network devices in the same way that I'm monitoring my agent managed devices here. I found, at least in my history with these devices, is that when you're monitoring network devices, especially through just the method that I told you just a second ago, you're really going to get up-down information. You're not going to get much more than up-down information. There are additional management packs that you can add that may be able to pull in additional information. Maybe you've got a Cisco management pack that can pull in additional information, like NetFlow information, that provides you more information about how the data is moving, aggregate information about data moving back and forth off of your network devices. But for the most part, this is a great solution if you just want to know when the network devices in your environment are perhaps up or perhaps they're down. Now, I do want to talk back also about the properties of the agent installed to individual systems in your environment. This is moving away from network devices. If we go back to these agent managed devices here, and as you can see here, we now consider our dcnugget.nuggetlab.com to be a healthy system. We've completed all of the startup steps, the bootstrapping steps in order to get that agent up and running and reporting. If I right-click on this agent and choose properties, you'll see I have a couple of very small things that I can set here. If I have one particular agent that I want to change that heartbeat interval, I can override the global settings that we talked about in the last nugget here by checking this checkbox. Or I can actually have this agent be a proxy for discovering managed objects on other computers. Now, why would I want to do this? Let's say that I have an agent that is somewhere else in my environment. Maybe it's separated by firewall. Maybe it's over a slow link, for example. And the next time that I want to go through and do a discovery, I want to allow this agent to assist me with the discovering of those other managed manage objects on other computers. If I check this box, it's going to make that agent essentially that proxy for assisting my operations manager server with the discovery. Now again, the slow networks line between here and there is sort of a bad example, but if you do have a firewall, or if you have separated out one particular agent from another, or maybe it's on another domain, this allows you to essentially proxy those discovery requests using this agent. Now obviously there's some risks involved because you're opening up that agent for exposure, but this is available to you if you want to select that checkbox. I'm going to choose no here and go ahead and leave the agent installed as is. Now I told you that you could also install the agent directly off the CD or directly off the ISO file for Operations Manager if you want to. Again, if we do that, we want to make sure back here in the settings that we check the security node here, the security element here, to make sure that we are going to allow agent installations and put them either in pending or to automatically approve newly manually installed agents. That has to be set, or we're actually going to reject those new manual agent installations by default. I'm actually going to bring up another server here. This is going to be the domain controller. And now, admittedly, I've already installed the agent onto this server through the last step, but what I want to show you is the process by which you can do that agent installation manually. Under my computer, I've actually put the media in the drive here in this DVD drive here, CD drive, for Operations Manager. And if I double-click that again, you're going to notice that I have the ability to install the Operations Manager 2007 agent. I'm going to click this to actually begin that installation process. We're not going to finish it because the process is already installed, but what this allows me to do is, well, it's because it's already installed, I'm going to choose Modify, Repair, Remove. What it allows me to do is effectively install that agent to that machine just like a regular standard software installation. And when I'm doing this, it's going to prompt me for the management group that I want to install the agent to, and also the name of the management server associated with that management group. Now, again, I have to have the settings correct for this to function, or the agent installation is going to be rejected by my Operations Manager instance. But this is the process by which you could take your CD or DVD media and walk it around from server to server to manually install those agents as necessary. Now, once you complete that process, you're going to go back here to our Operations Manager console. Once you complete that process, you'll see a note up here called Pending Management. Any of those systems that you actually install the agent manually and you require an approval to occur for you to actually complete that, they're going to show up in here. They're going to show up in here with a management state and a primary management server assigned, and also the name of the client. Once those are there, you can choose one by one to select which ones you want to approve, and those will go from pending management up into agent managed, and then you'll have the full capability of working with those clients. Now, I told you that Microsoft also makes it available for you to install that agent through the command line. The agent is actually just an MSI file, so it follows the standard conventions for MSI file installation. Let me go ahead and bring up that other server once again. I want to bring up this server, and I want to click on my computer, and I actually want to open up this the contents of this DVD instead of actually looking at it, and then go to the agent folder. You'll see there are 3 subfolders here for Itanium servers, 386, and then 64-bit servers here. I'm going to click here for i386, and you'll see this mom agent.msi file. This is the actual MSI file that actually installs that agent to your computer. And again, if you're familiar with the concept of packaging software, you'll probably be happy to note that the mom agent.msi follows all the standard conventions for packaging software. Let me actually, instead of just writing this out, let me actually bring up the Operations Server or Operations Manager 2007 operations guide. Now, this is the guide that assists you with understanding all the things you need to do for actually using Operations Manager. And if you look down here, this is actually page 39 of the Operations Guide, you'll see here that it has a section called To Deploy the Operations Manager 2007 Agent from the Command Line. And you'll see here, again, if you're familiar with the silent switches used for installing a piece of software, an MSI through silently, you'll see here we run MSI exec and /i, and then we run that mom agent, and we use the /qm configuration to run it silently. And then we have a number of different settings that we can choose beyond that to configure that agent at the time of installation. You'll see here as I scroll down just a little bit, we have use settings from Active Directory. We can specify the management group. We can specify the DNS name of the FQDN of the management server here. We can choose the secure port number. We can choose the computer account, what we want to use for the agent action account, the user, domain, and password for that agent action account. And that's pretty much all the items that we would want to set at the point that we want to deploy the Operations Manager 2007 agent from the command line. And here's an example of how you would do that. Again, the place where you're going to want to find that is in the Operations Manager 2007 Operations Guide. So take a look at that if you want to do those deployments. Once you have that silent deployment for the agent, what you can do is plug that into your configuration manager or plug that into any of your software deployment systems and automatically push those agents out as necessary, and then later approve them in the pending management location. Now, the last thing that we want to talk about in this particular nugget is talking about the auto assignment of clients based off of variables that you've entered into Active Directory. Now, if you'll remember back not too long ago, we actually, about 2 nuggets ago, we actually went and talked about the process of extending the schema using that mom AD admin tool. If I go under here into support tools, there's mom AD admin. That's the tool that will actually go and extend the schema for your domain so that you can actually include a container in there for operations management. Let me actually show you where that actually can be found so you can validate that that is correct. If I close this down and open up the ADUC, the Active Directory users and computers here, you'll notice that this is our standard Active Directory users and computers. If I go to the View tab and choose Advanced Features, you'll see that I now have, because I've already run this tool, I now have an Operations Manager container that appears in my Active Directory. I have a subcontainer called Nugget Servers that's related to the management group that I've created, and in there is a little information about the security group associated with that Nugget Servers management group. And that's more or less all that I need to do. The Operations Manager server is going to see that that container is available there and actually begin populating that with the information needed so the agents can actually go and look to there to find what their management server should be. But we're not done yet. There's more that's involved with actually doing this. And what we actually have to do is go up here under Management Servers and right-click one of our management servers that we're interested in creating this auto agent assignment, and we want to choose the Properties tab here. Now, under the Properties tab here, we have the choice of choosing an auto agent assignment, and what we want to create is an auto agent assignment, more or less a policy associated with that agent assignment. If I click the Add button here and choose the Next button, what I'm doing here is I'm saying I want to specify the domain that the agent computers are in. In this case, it's nuggetlab.com, and I can choose a different account if I want for doing that auto agent assignment if necessary. When I choose the Next button here, I need to create a query, an LDAP query, that more or less discovers which of those computers do I want to automatically assign based off of more or less what I'm looking to do. So if I don't have this query, all the systems in my environment would automatically just be assigned to this server. Well, I want to narrow it down to the systems that I'm interested in. If I click the Configure button here, you'll see Find Computers again, just like I'm used to seeing before. Maybe I can choose, instead of the computer name here, maybe I can choose Workstations and Servers, or maybe just All Domain Controllers, for example. If I choose All Domain Controllers here, that'll choose a inclusion agreement that shows primary group ID equals 516. Now, in addition to having an inclusion criteria, I may also want to have an exclusion criteria as well. So what this allows me to do is say, give me all of the servers, for example, all the domain controllers that I showed in the last slide, or in the last window, and then say, but maybe I don't want this one. Right? So all of the machines that correspond to the inclusion criteria, and then call out those that are in the exclusion criteria. I can do that by computer name here, by semicolon, separated by semicolons, commas, or even a new line. Once I've done that, I have the option of choosing how I want to fail over those agents as well. Do those agents automatically fail over, or do I manually fail over if, for example, the management server that they're attempting to connect to is unavailable? Now, I only have one management server in this evaluation environment, so we don't really have the option of choosing other management servers that are connected into this environment, but if I did, they'd be available here. In this case, let me just choose to automatically manage the failover and create that agent assignment. Once that agent assignment is created, now all of the agents that correspond to that inclusion criteria that we just created will automatically be assigned to this management group and will be assigned to this management server. You'll see right here. Now, this has nothing to do with the installation of the agent itself. What this has to do is assigning that agent to that management server. There's still a separate step that you'll have to go through to actually install the agent. You can do that here from within the client through any of the tools that we've talked about here in this nugget. But that's the process you would use to do that auto agent assignment here. So what have we talked about in this nugget? We've talked about a number of different fairly exciting topics here associated with getting those agents onto our systems. We talked about the different types of monitoring that are available to us, and then also the discovery wizard that allows us to discover resources out in our environment, both network resources and Windows-based resources. We talked about the manual agent installation and also deploying agents from the command line if you're wanting to maybe push those out using a silent installation. And then lastly, we talked about using Active Directory to assign computers to management groups and to management servers. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.